The day the Orhul Dominion laughed at Earth, I was the one assigned to record it. My name is Celes Vorn Tackle, archivist of the Third Order attached to the Veteran Observation Council. My species does not fight. We watch. We catalog. We file. For 470 years I have written down what other species do to each other, and I have rarely been surprised. I was surprised that day. What I am about to describe broke three of my people's core assumptions about how war works. We believed war was won by mass. We believed war was won by hierarchy. We believed war was won by the species that could give the most orders in the shortest time. All three of those beliefs died at the Kelvarn Reach, in 6 hours, against 200 humans in dress uniform. The mockery lasted 19 minutes. The war lasted 6 hours. The doctrine the Orhul Dominion had used to conquer 81 worlds did not survive the afternoon. I am writing this for my own records. The official report is shorter, and it leaves out the part that matters. The official report does not say what I saw a wounded human do at the 7th hour. The official report does not say what a Terran sergeant said into an open channel that I have not been able to stop thinking about. The official report does not say that I, archivist Celes Vorn Tackle, deleted a line from my own filing because I was not certain my people were ready to read it. This is the story of how an empire that had never been beaten learned that the most dangerous thing in the galaxy is not a weapon. It is a captain who will obey a private. It is darker and stranger than any story I have written down before. The Kelvarn Reach is what my species calls a mourning system. The blue giant at its center is dying. It has been dying for 2 million years, and it will continue to die for another 400,000, and during its long, slow collapse, it has become one of the most contested pieces of space in the local arm of the galaxy. 12 species claim partial rights to it. None can be settled by treaty. The Council station that orbits the system's third planet exists specifically so that armed disputes can be observed by neutral parties and recorded for the historical archive. I have served at Kelvarn Station for 11 years. In that time, I have witnessed 43 armed disputes, 11 small wars, and 2 attempted genocides. I thought I had seen the range of what war looked like. The Orhul Dominion arrived first, on the 14th day of the Reach's standard calendar. They did not arrive quietly. The Orhul never arrive quietly. Their doctrine considers the approach itself to be the first weapon. 12 dreadnoughts entered the system in perfect formation, weapons cold but visible, broadcast emissions tuned to maximum across every recognized channel. 40,000 ground troops in matched battle dress paraded across the observation decks of their flagships for the cameras of every neutral species watching. The High Marshal of the operation was Kreneth Vadalar of House Dalar. I had recorded him before. He was the architect of the Cenarian collapse and the conqueror of the Vuli Belt. He had a face like a closed hand and a voice that had been trained from childhood to fill rooms it had not entered yet. He was 63 years old by Orhul reckoning and had never lost an engagement. When he addressed the watching neutrals from the bridge of his flagship, he did not speak as a general. He spoke as a man explaining a process. The process was the absorption of the Kelvarn Reach into the Dominion sphere. The timetable was 19 standard days. The Terran cruiser arrived 4 days later. It was one ship, mid-sized by human standards, old by anyone else's. Its name in the human language was Constance, which the Orhul translator rendered as unmoving object, and which my own archive software rendered as the quality of not turning away. Both are technically correct. Neither is what the humans meant. The cruiser docked at the council station and disgorged exactly 200 soldiers. They wore dress uniforms, dark blue jackets, polished boots, white gloves, ceremonial sidearms at the hip and ceremonial blades on the belt, no visible heavy weapons. No armor beyond the kind a parade ground requires. The senior officer was a Colonel Aaron Halford, age 51, of the 4th Terran Expeditionary. He walked off the cruiser at the head of his 200 and saluted the council recorder, which was me, and presented his credentials, which were in order. I logged him in, and he proceeded to the human delegation quarters with his soldiers behind him in a column that was, I noted in my private files, extraordinarily neat. I assumed I was looking at a token. I assumed Earth had sent a ceremonial detachment because Earth could not afford a real one. I assumed the dress uniforms were the entire point, a gesture of dignified withdrawal, a way of being present at the loss of the Reach without expending forces on a fight humans could not win. I was not the only one who assumed this. Every species watching assumed it. The Orhul certainly assumed it. The galaxy already knew who would win. The galaxy was about to be wrong. The mockery began at the public address ceremony on the 17th day. The council protocols require that any party intending to assert military claim on a contested system must publicly state their case before the assembled neutrals. The Orhul had requested the slot. High Marshal Kreneth Vadaler had prepared remarks. He delivered them from a raised platform in the council's main hall, in front of representatives from 12 species, with the Terran delegation seated in the third row. Colonel Halford was in the front of his group. 200 of his soldiers stood in formation behind him. They had been allowed to attend in their dress uniforms. They had been allowed to bring their ceremonial sidearms. They looked to every observer in the hall like exactly what they appeared to be, a polite, decorative honor guard that had been sent to bear witness to their own defeat with grace. The High Marshal began by thanking the council for the opportunity to address the assembly. He spoke for 4 minutes on the strategic importance of the Reach. He spoke for 3 minutes on the Dominion's historical claims. Then he turned slowly to face the Terran delegation, and he spoke for 12 minutes on what he called the courtesy of Earth's response. It was the most precise act of public humiliation I have ever recorded. He did not raise his voice. He did not use insults. He praised the humans. He praised them at length. He praised the cleanliness of their uniforms. He praised the discipline of their formation. He praised the wisdom of their commander for understanding the situation so clearly that he had brought a ceremonial unit rather than wasting real soldiers on a contest that would have ended in their deaths. He used the phrase ceremonial pet army twice. He used the phrase the dignity of a graceful withdrawal 4 times. He thanked Colonel Halford personally for not pretending Earth could compete with the Dominion in any meaningful military sense. The Terran delegation did not move. Not one of the 200 soldiers behind Colonel Halford shifted their weight. Colonel Halford himself watched the High Marshal with an expression I logged at the time as resignation, and which I later understood was nothing of the kind. At the end of the address, the High Marshal extended an open hand toward Colonel Halford and invited him to speak. The council protocols allow a response. Most species use the response to negotiate terms of surrender or to formally lodge a protest. Colonel Halford stood. He walked to the platform. He took the speaking position. He looked at High Marshal Kreneth Vadaler for the length of 1 full breath. Then he said 6 words. "We'll see you on the field." He returned to his seat. The Orhul translator, working in real time across 9 official languages, rendered the phrase as, "We will perceive you in an agricultural environment." The Vethran archive software, which I personally maintain, rendered it as, "Visual confirmation will occur in a designated combat zone." Neither was correct. The human idiom carried a meaning neither translator possessed the vocabulary for. It was not a threat. It was not a boast. It was a statement about the relocation of the conversation. I noted Colonel Halford's silence after the speech and recorded it in my preliminary report as evidence of shame. I was wrong. I have since revised the entry. He was not silent because he had nothing to say. He was silent because everything he intended to say required a different room. The room he wanted was the surface of the moon Kelvarn IVC, where the Dominion's landing force was expected to make planetfall in 72 hours, and where 200 humans in dress uniform were going to do something The galaxy did not have a word for yet. I was not supposed to see the human briefing. The Veteran Council does not record closed delegation meetings, but the Council station's atrium cameras have a wide field of view, and the Terran delegation had elected to hold their final operational meeting in an open-air courtyard, and I had clearance to review atrium footage as part of my standing observational duties. I watched the meeting 4 times before I understood what I was watching. I have watched it many more times since. There were 6 humans in the courtyard. Colonel Aaron Halford, Major Priya Shandikar, the intelligence officer, a small woman with iron-gray hair and a habit of looking at the ground when she spoke. Sergeant Major Eli Brooks, infantry, broad-shouldered, with the kind of voice that did not need to be raised to be heard at the back of a hall. Lieutenant Naomi Vasquez, drone operations, 28 years old, who kept her hands in her pockets and her eyes on a tablet. Dr. Henrik Olsen, the medical officer, who was older than Colonel Halford and who looked, to my eye, more like a librarian than a soldier. And one more, a junior officer I did not catch the name of in the audio. I expected a battle plan. I had recorded hundreds of pre-engagement briefings across 40 species, and they followed predictable patterns. Maps, lines of advance, Phase 1, Phase 2, Phase 3, designated commanders for each axis of attack, contingency trees, fallback positions, chains of authority laid out so clearly that any soldier in the field could trace the order they were following back to the single mind that had issued it. That is not what happened in the courtyard. Major Shandikar spoke first. She had a tablet. She turned the tablet so the others could see it. She did not present a plan, she presented a list. The list had 23 items. Each item was a sentence. Each sentence described a condition. If the Orhul land their armor on the northern plain, the terrain east of the ridge becomes the priority. If the Orhul split their landing force, the secondary force is the priority. If the Orhul attempt to capture the comms station intact, the comms station is the priority. If the Orhul command net fragments, exploit fragmentation immediately. If the Orhul command net consolidates, accelerate fragmentation. The list went on. None of the items specified who would execute the action. None of them specified a chain of command. None of them specified a sequence. Colonel Halford listened to the entire list without interrupting. When Major Shandikar finished, he asked one question. He asked it of the room, not of any particular officer. The question was, anything missing? Sergeant Major Brooks added 2 items. Lieutenant Vasquez added 1. Dr. Olsen added a half sentence about the medical corridor that the other 5 accepted with nods. The junior officer added nothing. Then Colonel Halford said, "Good, make sure everyone has it by 2100, and the meeting ended. I watched the footage 4 times because I could not find the order. There was no operational plan. There were no assigned commanders. There was no sequence of phases. There were 26 trigger conditions and an expectation that every soldier in the 200-soldier expedition would receive them, understand them, and act on them. I filed a query with my own archive system. I asked the software to search for the concept distributed operational authority under enumerated trigger conditions in a combat context. The software returned no results in any of the 17 languages I have indexed. I queried the Council's master archive. The Council's master archive returned no results. The concept did not exist in the recorded military doctrine of any species I had access to except one. That one was Earth. I did not understand what I was looking at. I noted my confusion in the private file. I prepared for the engagement assuming I had misread the meeting. I had not misread the meeting. I had read it correctly. I had simply not yet learned how to understand what I had read. The Orhul landing began at dawn local time on the moon Kelvarn IVC. The landing was, by any reasonable measure, perfect. 12 drop platforms descended in interlocking formation. 8,000 troops in the first wave, 15,000 in the second, the rest staged in orbit. Armor units deployed first, followed by infantry, followed by command echelons. The Orville landing template had been refined across 81 previous campaigns. It had never failed. The drop zone was the broad plateau north of the contested Reach mining facility. The plateau was 9 kilometers across and bordered on 3 sides by broken terrain, old lava channels, collapsed ridges, the eroded foundations of a settlement that had been abandoned 6 centuries ago. The Orville landing template assumed that any defending force would either hold the mining facility itself or array along the plateau's northern edge to contest the landing. The humans were not in either position. I know this because I had access to the Council's orbital sensor net, which recorded the full engagement in detail and which I reviewed many times in the months that followed. The 200 humans were not at the facility. They were not on the northern ridge. They were spread across 9 kilometers of broken terrain on all 3 flanking sides of the drop zone, in groups of between 4 and 20 soldiers, in positions that the Orville landing template did not recognize as defensible because they did not face the landing zone in any conventional sense. Some faced inward. Some faced outward. Some were dug in along the lava channels. Some were on the high ground. Some were below the plateau entirely in the old settlement ruins. They were not in dress uniform anymore. They had changed. The first shots were fired at 6 minutes past dawn. They were fired by a 4-soldier human team in a lava channel 2 kilometers east of the drop zone, and they were fired at an Orville armor unit that had advanced past their position without seeing them. The team did not radio for permission. They did not coordinate with adjacent units. They identified a target of opportunity, engaged, destroyed 2 Orville walkers with shoulder-fired ordnance, and relocated 300 meters before the Orville response arrived at their previous position. 11 seconds later, a 6-soldier team on a ridge 4 kilometers west of the drop zone engaged a different Orville armor unit. Then a 12-soldier team in the settlement ruins engaged Orville infantry. Then a 3-soldier team at the southern edge of the plateau called in orbital fire on an Orville command vehicle. The orbital fire is the moment I want to dwell on. The team that called it was led by a sergeant named Eli Brooks, the same Sergeant Major Brooks I had observed in the briefing courtyard. He was 3,000 meters from the nearest officer above his rank. The orbital fire asset he called was the cruiser Constance, in geostationary position over the Reach. The fire mission required a precise coordinate set, a target description, and a launch authorization. The launch authorization, in every military doctrine I had ever recorded, required a field-grade officer or higher. Sergeant Brooks did not have a field-grade officer present. He had the trigger conditions list. The trigger conditions list had been updated in the 72 hours since the briefing to include the phrase command vehicle within engagement envelope and identifiable. Sergeant Brooks identified the vehicle. The vehicle was within his engagement envelope. He gave the launch authorization. The cruiser Constance fired. The Orville command vehicle ceased to exist. 3 Orville sub-commanders died in that strike. The Orville command net flooded with status queries that had no one to answer them. This happened at 23 minutes past dawn. The Orville landing was, as far as the Orville hierarchy was concerned, still proceeding on schedule. The Orville commanders in the orbital flagship were still receiving the reports that had been queued before the strike. By the time they understood that one of their command vehicles had been destroyed by orbital fire authorized by an enemy sergeant, the humans had destroyed 2 more, and the Orville command net was no longer functioning as a command net. It was functioning as a queue of contradictions. I logged the contradictions in real time. I had access to the Orville command channel through Council observer protocols. The Orville commanders on the ground were submitting requests upward for clarification on whether to engage targets that were no longer in their previous positions. The Orville commanders in orbit were submitting requests downward for status reports that the ground commanders could not generate because their sub-commanders were dead. The Orville landing template, which assumed a single coordinated human response, was attempting to formulate a single coordinated Orho counter-response to 9 simultaneous and apparently uncoordinated human attacks. The template was not capable of the task. This was the first hour of the engagement. By its end, the Orho had lost 11% of their landing force. The humans had lost 3 soldiers. I want to be precise. I do not want to be poetic. The humans were not stronger than the Orho. They were not better armed. They were not more numerous. They were 200 against 23,000. They were not even, in any individual sense, more skilled. The Orho soldiers were professional killers from a culture that had refined the practice across centuries. The humans were faster, not in the body, in the mind. The Orho command net required a decision to travel from ground to orbit to ground again, which took, on average, 4 to 7 seconds at the lowest levels and up to 30 seconds at higher echelons. The human command net required a decision to travel from a soldier's eyes to that soldier's hands, which took as long as it took to think. The Orho were not losing because they were outnumbered. They were losing because, by the time their orders arrived, the situation those orders had been written for did not exist anymore. At 94 minutes past dawn, Lieutenant Naomi Vasquez became the operational commander of the entire Terran Expeditionary Force for 9 minutes. She did not request the position. She did not announce it. The position simply moved to her because Colonel Halford was occupied. The Orho had attempted, at 89 minutes past dawn, to jam the cruiser Constance's downlink to the surface. The jamming was sophisticated. It required a coordinated counter-effort from both the cruiser and the surface comms team to restore. Colonel Halford was on the surface. He took personal command of the counter-jamming effort because the team performing it was under strength, and because he had relevant signals experience from earlier in his career. The effort required his full attention for the duration. During those 9 minutes, the human force on the surface continued to engage. They did not pause. They did not wait for the colonel to return to the command channel. Lieutenant Vasquez, 28 years old, drone operations specialist who had been 3 months on station, took over the operational picture from her observation post on a ridge south of the drop zone. She did not ask permission. She had the trigger conditions list. She had a working comms relay. She had a clearer overhead view of the battlefield than anyone else in the human force. She began issuing target priorities to adjacent units. She did not issue orders. She issued information. The Orho armor on the eastern flank has rotated its formation. The rear vehicles are now exposed. The Orho infantry on the northern ridge has lost contact with their command element. They are not receiving instructions. The Orho command vehicle on the southern axis has moved to grid reference 472. It is no longer protected by its escort. 6 human teams acted on her information. They did not check it with the colonel. They did not check it with each other. They acted because the information was good and the trigger conditions allowed them to act. At 103 minutes past dawn, the counter-jamming effort succeeded, and Colonel Halford resumed full command of the operational channel. He noted the actions taken during his absence. He approved them retroactively. He did not reprimand Lieutenant Vasquez. He did not even mention what she had done. He simply incorporated the new tactical picture into his next decision. I have replayed that handover many times. I have looked for the moment of transition, the formal exchange of command. There is no such moment. The command was not given. It was not taken. It was assumed by the person who could see and released by the person who could see again without ceremony or acknowledgement. In Orho doctrine, the absence of a senior commander for 9 minutes during an active engagement would have produced a tactical collapse. The hierarchy would have stalled. Subordinates would have waited. The fight would have paused while authority sorted itself out. In Terran doctrine, the absence of a senior commander for 9 minutes produced 6 more destroyed Orho vehicles and a 40-degree shift in the operational center of gravity. I did not have a word for this. My archive software did not have a word for this. The Vethrin language does not have a word for this. I have had to invent one for my private journal. The word I have chosen is distributed will. It is not a perfect translation, but it is the closest my language permits. At 3 hours past dawn, High Marshal Kreneth Vadaler ordered a full assault from orbit. This was a mistake. It was the kind of mistake that an empire makes when its doctrine is failing and it has nothing else to fall back on. The High Marshal had built his career on the principle that overwhelming force, properly applied, breaks any defense. He had been correct on 81 previous occasions. He believed he would be correct on this one. He ordered the second wave reserves to deploy. He ordered the third wave staging units to deploy. He ordered the orbital armor to commit to the surface. 40,000 troops became 70,000. 12 dreadnoughts began launching atmospheric ordnance. The Orhul turned the entire weight of their fleet against 200 humans spread across 9 kilometers of broken ground. The assault accelerated the collapse. The Orhul hierarchy could move a small force through a complex decision tree slowly. It could not move a large force through a complex decision tree at all. The additional units arriving on the surface required orders. The orders required higher authorization. The higher authorization required information about the ground situation. The ground situation could no longer be summarized in any document the Orhul command structure could process. Adding more troops did not add more force. It added more Q. The humans simply expanded their target list. More targets meant more triggers. More triggers meant more actions. The 200 did not become more numerous, but each individual soldier had more to shoot at, more orbital fire to call down, more openings to exploit. Their effective combat power scaled with the size of the enemy formation in a way the Orhul had never observed before. At 3 hours and 22 minutes, a moment occurred that I have replayed in private more than any other moment in my 47 decades as an archivist. A human private, name of Marcus Holloway, age 22, 11 months in service, was injured during an Orhul artillery barrage. His left leg was broken below the knee. His squad leader was dead. He was alone in a lava channel with a working radio and a clear line of sight to an Orhul armor company moving along the ridge above him. The armor company was being engaged by a human captain, name of Sarah Reyes, age 34, 12 years in service, who was 300 meters away with the remainder of Holloway's platoon. Private Holloway opened the command channel. He gave a field order to Captain Reyes. The order was, pull back 50 meters and let them come over the ridge. I have the angle. I'll spot for orbital. Captain Reyes acknowledged. She pulled her platoon back 50 meters. The Orhul armor company crested the ridge. Private Holloway, with a broken leg in a lava channel, spotted the orbital fire mission. The cruiser Constance fired. The Orhul armor company ceased to exist. A captain obeyed a private. I want to be clear about what I am saying. A commissioned officer, 12 years in service, executed a tactical order issued by an enlisted soldier 11 months in service, in the middle of an active engagement, without hesitation and without reprimand. In Orhul doctrine, this would be mutiny. In every doctrine I had ever recorded across 40 species, this would be mutiny. In Terran doctrine, it was not even unusual. It was, I came to understand, the entire point. The trigger conditions list did not say the senior officer issues orders to the junior soldier. It said the soldier with the best information acts on it. Rank was a default, not a requirement. When the default could be improved upon, the humans improved upon it, and when the moment passed, the default returned. There was no ceremony for the transition because there was no transition. There was only the situation, and the soldier best positioned to address it. I sat in my observation booth in the council station and I watched a captain obey a private, and I felt something I had not felt in 470 years of recording wars. I felt afraid, not of the humans, of the implication. Every empire I had ever recorded had been built on the assumption that authority flows downward. The humans had shown me what happens when authority flows in whatever direction the situation requires. It is the most efficient form of warfare I have ever witnessed. It is also the form of warfare that no rigid empire can copy, because to copy it would require trusting the soldier on the ground more than the general in the rear, and no empire that has ever existed has been willing to do that for long. At 5 hours and 41 minutes past dawn, the Orville command ship requested a ceasefire. The request was transmitted on the Open Council channel, which meant every neutral species in the system received it simultaneously. It was the most public surrender any species had offered in the recorded history of the Reach. High Marshal Kenneth Vaidaller's voice was steady. His phrasing was correct. He did not use the word surrender. He used the phrase operational pause for the discussion of terms. The phrase is a standard diplomatic formula. Every species in the hall recognized what it meant. Colonel Aaron Halford accepted the request. He did so quickly, without negotiation, on terms that the watching species initially assumed were a translation error. The terms were, Orville forces would withdraw from the Moon Kelvarn IVC within 6 standard hours. Orville forces would not enter the Reach without Council authorization for a period of 1 standard year. Orville prisoners would be returned. Human casualties would be repatriated. The Council's claim adjudication process would proceed normally. That was all. There was no indemnity. There was no territorial concession. There was no demand for High Marshal Vaidaller's removal. There was no public ceremony of submission. Colonel Halford asked for nothing he had not already won, and he asked for it politely. I logged the terms. I cross-checked them against the Orville command channel and confirmed they had been received correctly. I queried my own archive software for historical precedent. There was none. In every recorded engagement of the Orville Dominion's history, the victor had demanded everything the moment was permitted to demand. Colonel Halford demanded nothing the moment did not require. I did not understand at the time. I understand now. The colonel did not want a humiliated empire. He wanted an empire that could go home and think about what had happened and arrive on its own at the conclusion that Earth was not worth a second attempt. Humiliation produces revenge. Reflection produces caution. Colonel Halford had chosen the harder weapon. The Orville lost more than the battle. They lost the doctrine that had defined them. I have spoken since with 3 Orville officers who were present at the Reach. None of them will discuss the engagement on the record. One of them, off the record, told me that the worst part was not the casualties. The worst part was watching their command net fail in real time and not knowing how to fix it. Their entire understanding of war assumed that the side with more orders won. They had no language for an enemy that fought without orders. The running joke among the human soldiers, after the engagement, was that the Orville translator had spent 6 hours mistranslating every human phrase that crossed the open channel. Hold the line had been rendered as maintain the rope. Rain on their parade had been rendered as introduce precipitation to their ceremonial procession. Field day had been rendered as agricultural celebration. Sergeant Major Brooks reportedly laughed for 10 minutes when he was shown the transcripts. At the ceasefire ceremony, when Colonel Halford and High Marshal Vaidaller formally exchanged signed documents, the Orville translator made a final attempt at a human phrase. The colonel had said, quietly, to the High Marshal, "No hard feelings." The translator, for the first time in 6 hours, rendered the phrase correctly. "We bear no resentment." It was too late. The translator had finally learned the human language. The empire that had relied on the translator had already lost. I filed my official report to the Veteran Council 17 days after the engagement at the Kelvarn Reach. The report was 43 pages long. It described the order of battle, the casualty figures, the disposition of forces, the diplomatic outcome. It used the standard veteran archival vocabulary. It noted that the human force had demonstrated unusual tactical flexibility and that the Orville Dominion had suffered a strategic reversal. It did not use the phrase distributed will. It did not describe the moment when Captain Reyes obeyed Private Holloway. It did not describe Lieutenant Vasquez's 9 minutes of command. It did not describe what I had felt in my observation booth when I understood, finally, what I was watching. I deleted those sections before filing. I deleted them because I was not certain my people were ready to read them. The Veteran Council is 4,000 years old. It is built on a hierarchy of archivists, scholars, and judges. Authority flows downward in our system as cleanly as water. We have never lost a war because we have never fought one, but we have also never won a war, and I have begun to suspect that the two facts are connected. We do not trust each other enough to fight. The humans trust each other enough that fighting becomes a different kind of activity than what my people would recognize. I wrote the deleted sections into my private journal that night. I have continued to add to the journal in the years since. The journal is not for the council. It is for me, and perhaps for whoever finds it after I die. The last entry I wrote on the night I filed the report was a single sentence. I am going to record it here in this account, because this account is the journal, and because I no longer feel the need to hide what I have learned. The sentence was, the humans did not unleash a weapon at the Kelvarn Reach. They unleashed each other. I have thought about that sentence for many years. I have considered revising it. I have not been able to improve on it. The Orhul Dominion still exists. It has not attacked Earth. It has not attacked any human-claimed system in the 11 years since the Reach. High Marshal Kreneth Vadaler retired 6 months after the engagement. He lives in a private estate on his homeworld and gives no interviews. The Dominion's military doctrine has been revised 3 times since the Reach, in each revision attempting to incorporate elements of what the humans demonstrated. None of the revisions have worked. The Dominion has not been able to copy the humans, because to copy the humans would require the Dominion to become something other than the Dominion. A hierarchy cannot adopt distributed will without ceasing to be a hierarchy. The Orhul cannot trust their privates the way Captain Reyes trusted Private Holloway. If they could, they would not have been the Orhul in the first place. This is the lesson I took from the Kelvarn Reach. It is the lesson that, I think, the watching species took as well, though none of us have said so out loud. The most dangerous thing in the galaxy is not a weapon. It is a captain who will obey a private when the private is right. It is 200 soldiers in dress uniform who do not need a single mind to tell them what to do because they have already agreed in advance on what each of them will do when the situation arrives. It is the willingness to push trust downward until every soldier is a commander and every commander is a soldier, and the difference between the two is only the size of the moment. The humans did not win at the Kelvarn Reach because they were stronger. They won because they were faster, and they were faster because they were less afraid of each other than any species I have ever recorded. That is the real treasure of the engagement, not the territory, not the doctrine, not even the strategic outcome. The treasure is the idea that an army can be made of 200 minds instead of one, and that the 200 will move more quickly than the one, every time, in every situation that matters. I have filed my official report. The official report says what the official report needed to say. This account, which is the journal, says the rest. Some truths an empire is not ready to read. I am writing this one down anyway, in case the empire ever becomes ready. My name is Selly's Vorn Tackle. I am an archivist of the Third Order. I watched 200 humans break the Orhul Dominion in 6 hours at the Kelvarn Reach, and I have not been the same scholar since. This is what I saw. This is what I recorded. This is what I now believe.